my name is Rebekah Riggs. I'm here at the Homeschool Connection with our weekly show, The Brew. And The Brew is a mixture of people, events, or things that come together to make a more potent whole. And we want to make your whole a whole lot better. So I'm here with my afternoon brew, my pre-supper cup of coffee. And today we're going to be talking about, is grammar important? And I don't know, this is kind of an interesting one. Is it really important? So more and more we've kind of gotten away from grammar, especially from what we would call a classical or a typical grammar. Not so much even including diagramming and things like that. To me, that is grammar. Like what I learned when I was growing up is grammar, real grammar. Okay, so kind of to differentiate grammar from mechanics. Mechanics are kind of like your commas, your punctuation, your colons, how to use those different things. Whereas grammar is more what your subject, your verb, how words are used in a sentence. And so is it really important to learn all those things? So let me preface this by saying I am a math person, okay? I can get really excited about talking about some math, okay? I love me some math. So usually you're either a writing person, you're an English person, or you're a math person. So I am a math person. Writing is not my thing. I'm not a good writer. I'm not really good at it. No, I like it. I enjoy it. I enjoy teaching it and I know how to do it, but it's not my favorite thing. I don't just sit down and write for fun. It's kind of like pulling teeth. So is grammar important? So remember when you're listening to this, this is coming distinctly from a math person's point of view. Someone who is mathy. Yeah, I think it's really important. Okay, here's why. And here's why it's important to a math person. Well, first of all, it really is going to help me write better and help me teach writing better and help me to learn to write better. It's really hard to tell a child to make your sentence more exciting when you can't teach the parts of it. So an example is a verb. A verb shows action usually, or state of being. It can do different things, but usually when we write, we want to talk about a vivid verb. Make sure your verbs are very vivid. Instead of I sat in the chair, I lounged in the chair, I slouched in the chair, I reclined in the chair. Okay, so those are verbs. So if you know your parts of speech, if you can start by saying, okay, that's a verb, it's something you do. How do I make that word something you can do more interesting, more expressive? Okay, so it's better if you can start learning that grammar and you can put a part to a word. Okay, same thing with adjectives. How did he, or an adverb, how did he lounge? How did he sprawled in the chair? He lazily sprawled in the chair. Okay, so it helps you make your writing more descriptive and a little fuller. And so as you get into grammar, you start talking about clauses and phrases and how to build those words. The deeper you get into grammar, the deeper you can get into your writing. Because we don't want one-dimensional writing, we want in-depth writing with those phrases and those clauses. And I think as you study through grammar, it really helps you to be able to do that in real life. Now, here's a really big thing that kind of goes along with that is diagramming. Okay, I'm a huge proponent of diagramming. As someone who is a math person, I love me some diagramming because then I can break that sentence down and know how those parts in the sentence work. It's very visual for me. It kind of puts it into a little more perspective to me. It's not just saying a verb. Okay, this is where a verb goes. It always goes the same way. And then look, it relates to your noun or your, and uses in a sentence, a subject, different things like that. It really helps if you can see the parts. For me, it makes it a lot more visual, and then it can make your sentences, your writing much better. So I really think that as we're getting more and more into the digital age, that our spoken word is so different than our written word. It shouldn't be, but it is. The things we say, and our spoken word is always going to be changing and evolving, and meanings come and go for words, but a written word is always going to be a little bit more formal. And of course, that's the number one way that we can have, if you have written word, it can be passed down on to generations. Of course, that's how we have history from the past, is in our written word. And so in that, grammar is really important because it does help with how to write better. It does help you to better understand a sentence and therefore write better. It makes you a better speaker. All right, so when this video gets done, Facebook has this really awesome feature that it's going to take what I say and put it into words. And then it could make you really crazy if you started to look through and see how if the grammar is right on it. Of course it won't be, because it won't always put periods and commas, but if I'm just reading it, the way it's going to flow is going to be different than if I was just writing it down. Of course I'd want it to flow. Like I would want to speak how I write, and that is always the goal, but we don't always obtain that goal, so we want to try that. Another good reason why grammar is important, and I hate to even throw this out here, but it's on your SATs and your ACTs. All right? It is on SATs and ACTs. And it's going to be advanced grammar. All right? And when they see it on your SATs and ACTs, when you're testing on these standardized tests, it's not going to necessarily be the rules that we're used to. It's going to be those obscure rules, your misplaced modifiers, your tenses, all those different things are part of grammar and are so important. Well, you will be tested on it to get into college, and you will probably take some of those in college. Even if it isn't your major, you will take some of those classes. So I guess if you're saying, is grammar important? I think it's so important, not just for us to learn how to write, but making sure that we are preserving our English, preserving what we have, how we live, and how we perceive our days, and putting it in writing. That's why we have our children write, because more and more, we don't want to get away from that. You know, we want to be able to speak and write and preserve our feelings and things that you can put down in writing. Now, we can't always articulate what we want to say. Some people are better at articulating in writing than in speech, and some people have a hard time speaking it than they do writing it, back and forth. Another great thing to think about when we're talking about grammar is not just does it help you to write better, help you to learn how the parts of speech and different things can break down and make it write better, make you a better speaker. But also, if you know English and you can break down the parts, that's how you're going to learn another language. That's how we can relate our language to a different language. You have to be able to know your parts of speech to learn a different language. Usually when we learn a language, of course, there's spoken Spanish, and how it's spoken is not always how you learn it in a textbook or different things like that. But that is a thing. We have to be able to relate it to a different language. And the way to do that is through grammar, through our parts of speech. Now, I am not a language connoisseur. It's very hard for me. Languages were very hard for me. Mr. Gallardo taught me Spanish 1 and Spanish 2, and I was really bad at it. It doesn't click for me. I have a hard time. But I do know that in other languages, in Spanish, I do remember studying those verb lists, studying how to conjugate a verb, studying those parts. And so I did have to have something to relate it to in English. So the more you know of English and grammar and breaking it down, the easier it is to learn another language, because you know those parts and how they relate to each other. So to summarize, I think that grammar is very important. I think it's important because it helps us learn how to write better. And even if you're not a writer, it can make sense for you to be able to see the steps and the way to do it, and the more intricate parts of a sentence, the more intricate your writing gets. The deeper you go into grammar, the deeper you become in your writing skills and different things. As you're reading, that's why we also have to read deeper literature. The harder literature you read, that harder vocabulary, it'll lead into our writing, into our grammar. So for me personally, I never really had a hard time with grammar, because to me, I related it to math. And so it seemed very logical, especially when you diagrammed it. It seemed very visual for me. I think grammar without diagramming, probably I wouldn't have been able to get as well. So as a very visual learner, as a math learner, it kind of made sense to me. It's almost always the same thing. It has the same, the rules are pretty strict. There's always an exception in English, but to me, grammar made my writing, it made it easier for me to write. And help to break down a sentence. So I think it's very important. I like to make sure I have a grammar base, and I like to make sure that even in high school, we're digging a little bit deeper into that grammar. transitive active, transitive passive, knowing what those means, how to use those in sentences, and to relate your grammar to writing. Now, if you're just learning grammar for the sake of grammar and you're not relating it to writing or relating it to reading by itself, now make sure it needs to have that connection because they all kind of go together. It all goes together. So we learn grammar so that our writing will be deeper and better and have a little more meat to our bones for it. All right, so thank you so much. There you go. We'll also have some information here on the blog with some other topics about why grammar is important, some other opinions on that, and hopefully you'll skim over those. And I'm even going to throw in some good grammar resources on how to teach grammar, maybe to younger ones. And if you do, hopefully you will like, share, and come see us on Friday morning for the brew.